The summer I turned 12 should have been about baseball cards and video games. Instead, it became the summer that defined the rest of my life. I still remember the sting of the hot asphalt against my palms as I watched our family station wagon disappear down that dusty highway, my father's final words echoing in my ears, "Man up and find your own way home, Dylan." Little did I know that moment would alter my path forever. Before I continue this story, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button if abandonment stories resonate with you. Growing up in suburban Portland, Oregon meant rainy winters and mild summers. Our middle-class neighborhood was filled with similar-looking houses, basketball hoops in driveways, and kids riding bikes until streetlights came on. My family appeared normal from the outside. My father, James, worked as a construction foreman, his hands permanently calloused, his demeanor as rigid as the structures he built. He believed in traditional values, especially when it came to raising sons. "Boys need to be tough" was practically his mantra. My mother, Stephanie, kept the books for a local business part-time. Quiet and conflict avoidant, she typically deferred to my father on parenting decisions, her silence often feeling like agreement. Then there was my younger brother, Alex. Though only 2 years my junior, he seemed to embody everything my father wanted in a son. Athletic, outgoing, and naturally skilled at every sport he tried, Alex never seemed to disappoint. I, on the other hand, was the exact opposite. Introspective, creative, and sensitive, I preferred drawing and reading to hunting and fishing. My father viewed these traits as weaknesses that needed to be corrected. Despite the tension, I maintained hope that somehow, someday, I would earn his approval. Every summer, our family took an annual fishing trip to eastern Oregon, about 300 miles from home. This tradition had been going on since before I was born, but until that fateful summer of 1995, I had always been left behind with my grandparents or neighbors. "The fishing trip is for men," my father would say, as if 10-year-olds with comic books had no place in his masculine ritual. But that year when I turned 12, everything changed. "Dylan, you will be joining us this year," my father announced at dinner one April evening. His tone suggested this was less invitation and more initiation. I nearly choked on my mashed potatoes. "Really, the fishing trip? You are old enough now," he said, cutting his steak. "Time you learned what it means to be out in the wilderness. But I am warning you now, there will be no complaining, no whining, and no acting like a baby. You will be expected to pull your weight." "I will, Dad." "I promise," I said, excitement bubbling inside me. This was my chance to finally bond with him, to earn his respect. In the weeks leading up to the trip, I prepared meticulously. I read fishing magazines, practiced casting in the backyard, and even packed and repacked my bag multiple times to make sure I had everything I needed. The night before our departure, I laid out my clothes, a small tackle box my uncle had given me for my birthday, and a notebook where I planned to record my fishing successes. "You better not slow us down," Alex said, poking his head into my room that night. "Dad hates when people slow him down." "I will not slow anyone down," I replied with more confidence than I felt. The morning of our departure began with promise. Mom made pancakes shaped like fish, and Dad seemed in good spirits as we loaded the station wagon. I carefully placed my bag in the trunk, making sure it did not take up too much space. The air felt electric with possibility as we pulled out of the driveway. This was it. My chance to finally be one of the guys, to be the son my father wanted. The first few hours of the drive were peaceful. I watched through the window as the lush green landscape of western Oregon gradually gave way to the drier, more rugged terrain of the east. I attempted conversation several times, pointing out interesting landmarks or asking questions about fishing techniques. My father responded with single words or grunts, his attention fixed on the road ahead. By lunchtime, we stopped at a diner in a small town whose name I have long forgotten. The place smelled of coffee and grease, the vinyl booths cracked from years of use. "Order something substantial," my father instructed as we looked at the menus. "We have a long day ahead." When the waitress came, my father and Alex ordered burgers with all the fixings. I hesitated, then asked for a grilled cheese with tomato soup. My father's face tightened. "The boy will have a burger too. Rare." I hated rare meat, the sight of blood on my plate making my stomach turn. But I said nothing, and when the burger arrived, I forced myself to eat it despite the nausea building in my throat. This was the first sign that my father's irritation with me was already simmering. We arrived at the fishing spot by mid-afternoon. It was beautiful in a rugged way, the river cutting through rocky terrain, surrounded by sparse trees that provided little shelter from the Sunday. I struggled with my gear, the tackle box heavier than it had seemed at home, my fishing rod unwieldy in my inexperienced hands. I tried to hide my difficulties, but my father noticed everything. "Stop fumbling with that rod," he barked. "You will scare away all the fish." The first afternoon of fishing was a disaster. Alex caught 2 decent-sized trout within the first hour. My father landed a big one that he proudly photographed before releasing it back into the river. I caught nothing, my bait washed away by the current or tangled in underwater branches. Each failed cast earned a disapproving glance from my father, his disappointment palpable in the hot summer air. By evening, as we set up camp, my father's mood had soured completely. I tried to help with dinner, attempting to light the camping stove, but I turned the gas too high and caused a frightening flare-up that singed my eyebrows. My father snatched the matches from my hand. "Just sit down before you burn down the whole forest," he said. That night, lying in my sleeping bag, I listened to the sounds of nature around me and made a silent promise to do better the next day. If I could just catch one fish, maybe my father would look at me differently. Maybe he would finally see me as worthy. The second day of our trip began with pain. I woke to find my skin bright red and tight, the previous day's sun having turned me into a human lobster despite the sunscreen I had applied. My nose had blistered and my shoulders felt like they were on fire. Alex, naturally tanned, like our father, had no such problem. "Dad, I think I got sunburned pretty bad," I said as we ate breakfast, my voice cracking from the effort not to sound like I was complaining. My father barely glanced up from his coffee. "That is what happens when you have weak skin. You will toughen up or you will keep burning. Either way, we are going fishing." I nodded, blinking back tears as my t-shirt rubbed against my raw shoulders. Showing pain would only make things worse, I knew that much. We headed back to the river after breakfast. I was determined to make this day better than the last. But as we approached our fishing spot, disaster struck. I tripped over a rock, sending my tackle box flying. It hit the ground hard, the latch breaking open and spilling its contents across the rocky shore. Expensive lures, hooks, and fishing lines scattered everywhere, some falling into the water and being swept away by the current. My father froze his face, turning a dangerous shade of red. "You useless, clumsy." He stopped himself, but the words that followed were almost worse than if he had continued the insult. "I should have known you would not be ready for this. You have been nothing but an embarrassment since we left home." I scrambled to collect the fallen items, my sunburned skin screaming in protest as I crawled over the rocks. "I am sorry, Dad. I will fix it. I will replace anything that is lost." "With what money?" he scoffed. "Just pick up what you can and try not to cause any more problems today." The rest of the morning passed in tense silence. I focused entirely on my fishing, desperate to redeem myself. And then, miraculously, I felt a strong tug on my line. My heart leaped as I realized I had hooked something big. "I got one," I shouted, excitement momentarily overriding my fear of my father's judgment. "Well, reel it in. Do not just stand there," my father called back, actually sounding interested for once. I pulled back on the rod and began to reel just as I had practiced. The fish fought hard, the line cutting through the water in zigzag patterns. For one glorious moment, I felt like I might actually succeed, might actually make my father proud. Then the line went slack. The sudden release of tension sent me stumbling backward, and I knew immediately what had happened. The fish had gotten away. "Did you even set the hook properly?" my father asked, disgust evident in his voice. "Or did you just expect the fish to hook itself?" "I thought I did everything right," I mumbled, staring at the limp line dangling from my rod. "That was probably the biggest fish we have seen all day," he said. "And you let it get away because you do not know what you are doing." The mockery continued throughout the afternoon, with my father recounting my failure to Alex, both of them laughing at my expense. "Your brother had the catch of the day on his line and could not close the deal," he said, as if I were not sitting right there beside them. That night in the tent, I quietly broke down. Silent tears soaked my sleeping bag as I turned to face the nylon wall away from Alex in the darkness. "Hey," my brother whispered after a while. "It is not that big a deal. You will catch one tomorrow." But his words offered little comfort. We both knew tomorrow would likely bring more of the same. The third morning, exhausted from a night of fitful sleep, I overslept. The sun was already high when I finally emerged from the tent to find my father and brother already dressed and eating breakfast. "Finally decided to join the living, huh?" my father said. "We have been up for 2 hours." "I am sorry," I mumbled, my head pounding from dehydration and sunburn. My father threw his paper plate into the fire. "Pack your things. We are cutting this trip short." "What, why?" Alex protested. "Because your brother has ruined the whole experience," he said, not bothering to lower his voice. This was supposed to be a fishing trip, not a babysitting job. Shame washed over me as I realized I had failed completely. Not only had I not earned my father's respect, I had somehow made him resent me even more. Silently, I packed my belongings carefully, rolling my sleeping bag and placing my unused fishing journal at the bottom of my backpack. The tension in the car was thick enough to cut with a knife as we began the long drive home. No one spoke as we traveled down the dusty highway, my father's knuckles white on the steering wheel. After about 2 hours of silence, he pulled into a gas station in a tiny town I later learned was Junction City, about 80 miles from home. "I need to fill up," he said. "You two wait here." As he pumped gas, I realized I desperately needed to use the bathroom. My stomach had been in knots all morning, probably from the stress and the unfamiliar camp food. "Dad, can I use the bathroom?" I asked timidly. He sighed heavily. "Make it quick. We are not waiting around all day." I rushed into the gas station, found the restroom, and locked the door. My upset stomach meant I was in there longer than expected, perhaps 10 or 15 minutes. When I finally emerged feeling slightly better, I walked outside to find the parking spot empty. Our station wagon was gone. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Perhaps my father had moved the car to another part of the lot. I walked around the small gas station, checking every parking space. Nothing. A cold feeling settled in my gut as I realized what had happened. I went back into the station, trying to keep my voice steady, as I approached the attendant, an older man with a gray mustache whose name tag read Harold. "Excuse me, sir. Did you see where the blue station wagon went? The one that was just getting gas." Harold looked up from his magazine, his expression shifting from boredom to something like pity. "They left, son. About 5 minutes ago." "They left." I repeated, my voice small. "Are you sure? That was my family." Harold nodded, uncomfortable now. "Your dad said to tell you to, man up and find your own way home." I figured it was some kind of joke, but the floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet. This could not be happening. My parents would not just leave me at a gas station 80 miles from home. It had to be some kind of cruel test or joke. "Can I use your phone?" I asked, my voice cracking. "I need to call home." Harold pointed to a payphone near the restrooms. With shaking fingers, I dialed my home number, feeding the machine with quarters from my pocket money. The phone rang and rang. No answer. I tried 3 more times over the next hour. Still nothing. The reality began to sink in. My parents had actually abandoned me here in the middle of nowhere. They had driven away and left their 12-year-old son alone at a gas station with nothing but the clothes on his back and about $7 in his pocket. As the afternoon wore on, Harold's shift ended. His replacement, a younger man with a permanent scowl, was far less sympathetic. "You cannot just hang around here all day, kid," he told me around 6 p.m. "Either buy something or move along." I spent my last few dollars on a small bag of chips and a soda, making them last as long as possible. But eventually, as the sun began to set, the new attendant told me the store was closing for the night and I would have to leave. "But I have nowhere to go," I said, panic rising in my voice. "Not my problem," he replied, already counting the register. "We close at 8 p.m. I found myself standing alone in the parking lot of a closed gas station in a town I did not know, darkness falling rapidly around me. I walked up and down the main street, hoping to find the police station, but the tiny town seemed to have only one main road with a few businesses, most of them already closed for the night. As full darkness fell, my options dwindled. I was hungry, tired, and increasingly scared. The temperature was dropping, and all I had was a light jacket. Eventually, I made my way back to the gas station and found a spot behind the building, partially hidden by a large dumpster. It smelled terrible, but it offered some protection from the road and any cars that might pass by. I gathered some discarded cardboard from behind the mini-mart and made a makeshift bed. Curling up on the hard ground, I pulled my jacket tight around me and used my arm as a pillow. The physical discomfort was intense. The ground cold and hard beneath me, the smell of garbage overwhelming. But the emotional pain was far worse. How could they do this to me? What kind of parents would abandon their child just for being clumsy, for oversleeping, for not being good at fishing? As I lay there in the darkness, listening to the occasional car pass on the distant highway, the full weight of my situation crashed down on me. I was completely alone. No one was coming to save me. No one even knew where I was. I cried myself to sleep that night, my dreams filled with images of our station wagon driving away again and again, always just out of reach, no matter how fast I ran after it. I woke at dawn stiff and aching. My clothes were damp with morning dew, and my empty stomach cramped painfully. The first few moments of consciousness were blissfully blank, before the memory of what had happened came rushing back. This was not a nightmare. This was my reality. I made my way to the gas station bathroom, as soon as it opened, washing my face and hands in the grimy sink, trying to make myself look somewhat presentable. My reflection in the scratched metal mirror was frightening. Sunburned face, red-rimmed eyes, dirt smudged across my cheek. I looked like a homeless kid. I was a homeless kid. Back outside, I sat on the curb trying to figure out what to do next. That was when Martha found me. She was middle-aged with kind eyes, and a floral print dress pulling up to pump gas on her way to work. She noticed me sitting alone, the same clothes as yesterday, that lost look in my eyes. "Are you okay, sweetie?" she asked, her brow furrowed in concern. I started to nod to claim I was fine, but something in her gentle tone broke through my defenses. Before I knew it, I was telling her everything, the words tumbling out between sobs. Martha listened without interruption, her face growing increasingly concerned. When I finished my story, she put her hand on my shoulder, the first kind touch I had felt in days. "You poor thing. No child should ever be treated that way," she said. "Have you had anything to eat?" I shook my head, and she immediately took me to a small diner across the street. She ordered me a full breakfast: eggs, hash browns, pancakes, orange juice, watching as I devoured it all. I had not realized how hungry I was until the food was in front of me. "I am going to drive you to the police station," she said as I finished eating. "What your parents did was wrong, Dylan. It was not just mean, it was illegal." The local police station was a small brick building with just 3 officers on duty. Officer Rodriguez, a tall man with a thick mustache, took my statement, his expression growing darker with each detail I shared. "Let me get this straight," he said when I finished. "Your parents intentionally left you, a 12-year-old child, at a gas station 80 miles from home because you were taking too long in the bathroom." Put that way, it sounded even more horrific than it had in my head. I nodded, tears threatening again. "And you slept behind a dumpster last night?" Another nod. Officer Rodriguez exchanged glances with his colleague. "I am going to call your home right now," he said. "Then we will need to contact child services." The calls to my house went unanswered, just as mine had the day before. After several attempts, Officer Rodriguez decided to dispatch officers from the Portland Police to make a home visit. "In the meantime," he said gently, "we need to find you a safe place to stay." That was how I met Miss Jenkins, a social worker with tired eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. She arranged for me to stay with the Wilsons, an emergency foster family who had a small house on the edge of town. They were nice enough, though clearly overwhelmed with the 3 other foster children already in their care. I had a mattress on the floor in a room I shared with 2 other boys, but it was infinitely better than the ground behind the dumpster. For a week, I existed in limbo. No word from my parents, just daily check-ins with Miss Howards Jenkins, who assured me they were working on the situation. I spent my days helping Mrs. Wilson with chores and trying not to think about what would happen next. Then, on the 8th day, Miss Jenkins arrived with news. "The police made contact with your parents," she said. "They claimed you ran away during the gas station stop." I felt like I had been punched. "That is a lie. They left me, I know," she said. "The gas station attendant confirmed your story. Your parents have been informed that they either need to come get you immediately or face charges of child abandonment and endangerment." 2 days later, our station wagon pulled up outside the Wilsons' house. My father sat rigid behind the wheel, my mother pale and tight-lipped beside him. No sign of Alex. They had come alone. The car ride home was excruciating. No one spoke. No apologies, no explanations, not even accusations. Just silence so thick it was hard to breathe. I stared out the window the entire time, refusing to look at either of them. At home, things were no better. My room was exactly as I had left it 2 weeks earlier, as if frozen in time. My mother made dinner, and we all sat at the table, a grotesque parody of a normal family meal. "You have put us through a lot of trouble," my father finally said, breaking the silence. "The police, the social workers, all because you could not just find your way home like I told you to." I stared at him, unable to believe what I was hearing. I was 12. I was 80 miles from home with no money and no phone. There are buses, there are payphones. You could have figured it out if you were not so soft. That was the moment something inside me broke completely. The last fragile thread connecting me to these people snapped. I realized they were never going to acknowledge what they had done. They were never going to apologize. In their minds, I was still the problem. I excused myself from the table and went to my room, locking the door behind me. That night, I lay awake listening to my parents talking in the kitchen. Words like military school and straighten him out drifted up the stairs. They were already planning how to fix me, never once considering that they might be the ones who were broken. In that moment, I made a decision. I could not stay here. These people had abandoned me once. I could not give them the chance to do it again. My mother's sister, Aunt Karen, lived in Seattle. She and my mother had never been close, largely because Karen disapproved of how my father treated us kids. I had always liked her on her rare visits, the way she would wink at me when my father started on one of his rants about raising boys right. The next morning, while my parents were at work, I snuck into the kitchen and called her from our home phone. "Aunt Karen, it is Dylan. I need help." I told her everything from the fishing trip to the abandonment to the dumpster to my parents' reaction upon bringing me home. There was a long silence when I finished, and for a terrifying moment I thought she did not believe me either. Then she spoke, her voice thick with emotion. "Pack a bag, Dylan. Just the essentials. I am coming to get you. You do not have to drive all the way down here," I said, knowing it was a 3-hour trip. "I can take a bus. I have money saved from my birthday." She protested, but I was determined. I needed to do this on my own terms. We worked out the details, and I promised to call her when I was on my way. That afternoon, I packed a small backpack with clothes, my sketchbook, and the $60 I had saved. I wrote a note and left it on my bed. "Since you left me, I am leaving you." The bus to Seattle departed at 7 p.m. I bought my ticket with cash and boarded without looking back. As the bus pulled away from Portland, I felt something unexpected relief. For the first time in my life, I was making my own choice. Aunt Karen was waiting at the bus station in Seattle, her eyes red from crying. When she saw me, she rushed forward and pulled me into a hug so tight it almost hurt. "I am so sorry this happened to you," she whispered. "You are safe now." The legal battle that followed was complicated and messy. My parents initially demanded I be returned, though their effort seemed half-hearted at best. Karen filed for emergency custody, and a judge granted it after reviewing the police reports and social worker statements. My parents' fight for custody gradually faded as the weeks passed. It was as if having me gone had solved a problem for them. By the time the final hearing came, they agreed to let me stay with Karen permanently, provided they did not have to pay child support. The judge was disgusted, but approved the arrangement since it was what I wanted. As I walked out of the courthouse that day, I made a silent vow I would never speak to my parents again. They had not just abandoned me physically, they had abandoned their responsibility to love and protect me. As far as I was concerned, I had no parents. 18 years passed in what feels like the blink of an eye. I am 30 now, living in Seattle, where I built a life from the ashes of my childhood. Aunt Karen became more of a parent to me than my biological ones ever were. She supported me through high school, encouraged me to pursue my interest in computers, and helped me apply to college, beaming with pride when I received a partial scholarship to the University of Washington. I became a software developer, finding satisfaction in the logical world of code, where problems have solutions if you just look hard enough. The irony is not lost on me that my father's dismissal of my useless creative tendencies led me to a career that pays more than he ever made as a foreman. Therapy was a long journey, one that Karen insisted on from the beginning. "What happened to you will shape you," my therapist, Dr. Rivera, once said, "but it does not have to define you." Those words became something of a mantra, as I worked through the anger abandonment issues and trust problems that followed me into adulthood. My relationship with my brother Alex remained complicated. We never completely lost touch, settling into a pattern of birthday phone calls and occasional holiday messages. He stayed in Portland, took over my father's construction business, and married his high school sweetheart. From our limited conversations, I gathered that my parents rewrote the history of my departure, telling relatives and friends I had behavioral problems that made it necessary for me to live with my aunt. I never bothered to correct the record. What would be the point? The people who needed to know the truth already did. As for my parents, the wall between us remained absolute. 18 years of complete silence. No calls, no letters, no contact of any kind. I learned from Alex that my mother had health problems a few years back, and my father had finally retired. The news stirred nothing in me, as if he were talking about strangers from a town I once visited. My own life took a beautiful turn when I met Jessica 4 years ago. A kindergarten teacher with a quick laugh and infinite patience, she saw past my carefully constructed walls to the person beneath. On our third date, I told her my full story, expecting her to run. Instead, she took my hand and thanked me for trusting her with it. Jessica has a daughter from a previous relationship, Lily, who is now 8. Being a father figure to her terrified me at first. What if I carried my father's cruelty inside me somehow? What if it was genetic, lying dormant until I had a child to unleash it upon? You are nothing like him, Jessica assured me when I confessed these fears. I see how you are with Lily. You listen to her, you value her feelings. Those are not things you learned from your father. Those are things you learned not to do because of him. We built a life together, the three of us, in a cozy house near Green Lake. I proposed last Christmas and we planned to marry in the spring. Life was good, stable, predictable in the best possible way. Then the envelope arrived. Thick cream-colored paper, formal black script. Inside was an invitation to Alex's wedding. He was getting remarried after a divorce 2 years ago to a woman I had never met. My first instinct was to decline. Going back to Portland, potentially seeing my parents, seemed like an unnecessary reopening of old wounds. But Jessica encouraged me to consider it. He is still your brother, she said gently, and you have managed to keep that connection all these years for a reason. I was still debating when I noticed something else tucked inside the invitation. A smaller envelope, my name written in handwriting I recognized instantly as my mother's. My hands actually shook as I opened it. The note inside was brief. Dylan, we know we do not deserve your forgiveness. What we did was unforgivable. Not a day goes by that we do not regret leaving you at that gas station. We were terrible parents, and the pain we caused you haunts us. We would like to see you at Alex's wedding if you are willing. If not, we understand. Either way, we are sorry. Truly sorry, Mom and Dad. I read it 7 times, my emotions cycling through anger, shock, suspicion, and confusion. After 18 years, this was their apology. A note tucked into a wedding invitation. That night after Lily went to bed, Jessica and I stayed up late talking about it. What do you think I should do? I asked her, genuinely unsure. I cannot tell you that, she said, taking my hand. But I can tell you something my grandmother told me after my dad left us. She said forgiveness is not something you give to others, it is something you give to yourself. You think I should forgive them? I asked, surprised. I think you should do whatever brings you peace, she said. If that means never seeing them again, I support that. If it means hearing them out, I support that too. But do it for you, not for them. After much reflection and several sessions with Dr. Rivera, I made my decision. I would meet with my parents before the wedding on my terms in a neutral location. I would hear what they had to say, and then decide whether I wanted them to be part of my life moving forward. I called Alex and made the arrangements. He sounded relieved, though careful not to push. They have changed, Dylan, he said. They really have. The older they get, the more they talk about you, about what they did wrong. 2 weeks later, Jessica and I flew to Portland. The meeting was set for the hotel restaurant, where we were staying, a public place where I could leave if things became too difficult. Seeing them after 18 years was surreal. They had aged dramatically, my father's once imposing frame now stooped, and thinned, my mother's hair completely gray. They looked nervous, almost frightened, as they approached our table. The first few minutes were awkward, filled with small talk about the flight and the weather. Then my father cleared his throat, and did something I had never seen him do before he cried. "I have rehearsed this moment in my head 1,000 times," he said, his voice breaking, "and no words seem adequate. What we did to you was monstrous. I was a terrible father too, caught up in my own ideas of what a man should be to see the amazing son I had. Leaving you at that gas station was the worst thing I have ever done, and I have regretted it every day since." My mother reached across the table, not quite touching me, but extending her hand in supplication. "I failed you too," she said quietly. "I should have protected you from his anger, but I was too weak, too afraid to stand up to him. By the time I realized what was happening at that gas station, we were already miles away, and even then I did not insist we go back. I have no excuse." They spoke for almost an hour, telling me how the years after I left had forced them to confront their failures, how my father had eventually sought help for his anger issues, how my mother had finally found her voice. They did not ask for forgiveness or for me to rejoin their lives. They simply wanted me to know they recognized the harm they had done. "We understand if you never want to see us again after today," my father said. "We just wanted you to know that we know it was us, not you. It was never you." I sat in silence when they finished processing everything I had heard. The apology seemed sincere, the regret genuine. But 18 years is a long time, and some wounds cut too deep for simple solutions. "I appreciate you saying these things," I finally said. "I cannot promise what our relationship will be going forward. I need time. But I will be at the wedding, and we can see where things go from there." Relief washed over their faces. It was not forgiveness, not quite, but it was more than they had dared to hope for. The wedding itself was surprisingly emotional. Seeing my brother so happy, watching my parents navigate the event with visible nervousness about my presence, all of it stirred feelings I had long suppressed. Alex pulled me aside during the reception. "Thank you for coming," he said. "It means everything to me." "I would not have missed it," I replied honestly. "You know," he said, "you are the strong one. You always were. It took real strength to build a life after what they did. I just stayed and went along with everything." His words struck me profoundly. All those years my father had told me to man up, to be stronger, tougher, more resilient. Yet when true resilience was required, it was the sensitive, creative son who had found the strength to survive, to thrive despite everything. I returned to Seattle with a newfound sense of peace. Not because everything was resolved with my parents, but because I had faced them on my terms and maintained my boundaries. The scared 12-year-old boy sleeping behind that dumpster could never have imagined the man he would become. 2 months after the wedding, Jessica and I finalized our own wedding plans. As I looked at the guest list, I made a decision. I added my parents' names with an asterisk. Invited, but with conditions. Limited contact, supervised visits with Lily, and continued acknowledgement of the past. It was not forgiveness exactly, but it was a door left slightly ajar. Today, I am a father to Lily and a husband to Jessica. I have learned that real strength is not about manning up or hiding your emotions. It is about vulnerability, honesty, and the courage to break cycles of harm. That night behind the dumpster taught me what I did not want to become, and every day since then has been about building something better. While I will never forget watching that station wagon disappear down the highway, I no longer let it control my future. Sometimes the family we create matters more than the family we are born into. If you are carrying childhood wounds like mine, remember that your past is a chapter, not your whole story. The rest is still waiting to be written. What childhood experience shaped who you are today? Share in the comments below, and if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that they too can overcome their past. Thank you for listening, and remember that even the darkest nights eventually give way to dawn.